Hello, welcome to this video about the AQA GCSE English Language Paper 1. My name is Miss Kilburn-Bond and I work with all the English teachers across the Athelstan Trust. This is the third in a series of videos I've made about this exam paper, so the focus of this video in a moment is going to be on question 3. Before we talk about that though, just to go through the objectives of this session, hopefully over the 5 videos I'm helping you understand the overall format of the GCSE English Language Paper 1 and revise the priorities for each question. So in watching this video you will be developing a strategy that you can apply to question 3. And if you haven't watched the other videos already, the first video that talks about question 1, I talk through the extract that I'm using in these videos and where it comes from. You can see it on the screen there now, so if you haven't watched that video you could pause at this point and read this a couple of times, or go back and watch that first video just to get a sense of where this extract is coming from. It is from a children's book. Obviously that's not going to be what you're going to get in your exam. You'll get something that's more challenging, but in doing it through this very well written picture book, it means that I can spend the time focusing on explaining your strategies rather than trying to get you to understand on a screen a very long, more complicated extract. Okay, so let's start looking then at question 3. You now need to think about the whole of the source. So unlike the other questions, we're now looking at the whole extract that you've been given. This text is from the end of a short story. That might not be the case in your exam, and certainly if you start looking through past papers, then sometimes they come from the middle of a story, sometimes they come from the beginning, sometimes it's not a short story, it's from a novel. Here's the question. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? That question's always going to be the same, so you can prepare for this very question before you go into your exam. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? And it's not okay to answer, it doesn't interest me. For the purposes of this exam, you have to think about interest as being what were the writer's intentions in getting people to be hooked by what they're writing about. So there are 3 bullet points that are there to help and guide you through the question. You could write about what the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning of the source, how and why the writer changes this focus as the source develops, and any other structural features that interest you. And that's worth 8 marks. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? Now you've only got 10 minutes to answer on this. It's worth 8 marks. You can't justify spending longer than 10 minutes on this. So just like with question 2, what's really important about getting this question right is that you practice and you train to be able to write quality answers in 10 minutes. And you can't do that without training yourself and practicing just like you would in a sport. So you need to have a really clear strategy for what it is that you're going to look for. Now the great thing is that the exam board have told us that what they're going to look for when they choose the extract on your exam paper is they're looking for an extract that is going to have a shift in the focus, a change in the mood at some point. So you can use this as part of your strategy. And I've got 3 pictures to try and help you visually think about how this is going to be useful. So first of all, we've got the starting signpost. Very easy to start this question by talking about how the extract opens, what's happening at the start. Then we've got the shift key, because we know that somewhere in your extract there's going to be a change, a shift in the dynamic, a shift in the atmosphere in some way. And then the finish line, because if you then think about what happens at the end of the extract, why it's different perhaps than what we saw at the beginning, then you've got 3 very clear things to write about, and that's going to mean that it's achievable to write about this in 10 minutes. You can all do this. Now, the word structure you need to understand to answer this effectively. And structure is talking about the organisation of the story, the way that it's been built up and organised. So what you can see on the screen now are a series of pictures have come from this picture book that relate to the extract, but they're muddled up. The idea of structure would be how would you sensibly organise these pictures so that they tell the story of the extract. It doesn't make sense at the moment to have in the top left-hand corner the sea captain rowing away with Sam and his mother, because that doesn't happen in the extract. That's suggested that's what's going to happen after the end of the extract. But it would make sense to have the picture that's currently in the top right-hand corner moved over to the top left, because there we've got Sam pushing his mother in the wheelbarrow before they've reached the sea. At the bottom in the middle we've got the close-up picture of the sea itself, and that would make sense when we get to the section where we've got Sam staring at the sea, mesmerised by what he can find. So if you look at those pictures, think back to the extract, or maybe you've got the extract in front of you. Think about how would you organise those pictures, and what you're doing there is you are thinking about structure. That's what structure is. So we can use this to have this really sensible approach to how we're going to answer question 3. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? Well, the first thing you're going to do is look at the start. At the beginning of the text, the writer immediately establishes a sense of, and then you can finish that sentence with what that atmosphere is like at the beginning of the text. What's the focus? What seems important at the start of our extract? Then we move to the shift key. Find the bit in your extract where something changes and shifts. It will be there somewhere. As the extract develops, the writer changes focus too. The writer shifts our attention towards. And then you look for the finish. As the extract draws to a close, the writer deliberately focuses the reader's attention on, or the writer has changed the atmosphere for the reader. So those 3 things will give you that easy structure for your own answer when you're talking about the structure of the extract. Start, shift, finish. So if we now look at that extract, I've colour-coded it to try and show you where these 3 things appear to happen. So the start is in red. At the start of the extract, we could talk about those 2 paragraphs. Hurry up, the sea's calling, down to the little man trundling his mother away, noticing his suit's lost the buttons. That seems to be a sensible starting point for how the extract is setting up our expectations. The shift happens where the blue text starts. Then something new came into the wind scent. So the something new is the shift in the atmosphere, and then we have the suddenly they came over the hill. Suddenly there was the sea. So those simple sentences that are drawing our attention to this change in the dynamic of the text. And then at the bottom of the extract we've got the green writing, the finish line, where things have changed so drastically that the little man is now no longer trundling his mother along, not feeling particularly happy about getting to the sea. He's now dancing hippy hoppy happy hornpipes, and then by the end he's signed up to go to sea with the captain as the cabin boy. So very simply, when you get your text in the exam, when you're practicing for the exam, you can think about these 3 pictures: the start sign, the shift key, the finish line. Where can you place them in your extract? You can use colours, if that helps you, to draw big brackets around those sections, those 3 sections. And if you've watched the video for question 2, you will recognise some of these pictures, and you will definitely recognise these 3 key questions. So how has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? Well, we're going to ask 3 things. What is the writer showing us? How is the writer showing us this? And why is the writer showing us this? Exactly the same as question 2, except in question 2 we were looking at language. In question 3 we're looking at structure, the start, the shift, the finish. So what's the writer showing us? We're going to put some of those structural features, we're going to put the start, the shift, the finish under our microscope. How is the writer showing us this? We're scrapping the toolbox that we had for question 2. We're not interested in similes and metaphors and onomatopoeia this time. Instead, we're replacing it with a picture of a director's chair and a film camera, because we're going to think more like a film director. How is the writer showing us this? Well, we're going to look at structurally how we're guided through the text, and I'll explain this idea about the film in a moment. And then, just the same as in question 2, why is the writer showing us this? We're going to think about, as the reader, how do we react to these structural techniques? So let's try and dig a bit deeper into this second question. How is the writer showing us this? when we're thinking about the director's chair and the camera. Now, if you think about watching a film, watching something on television, a lot of atmosphere is created through sound and things like music and obviously what characters are saying, but also through camera angle and sight and visuals. So camera angles can be really powerful. In the top left hand corner there's a sort of cartoon summary of some of the main camera angles we encounter when we're watching film and television. We've got extreme close-ups, we've got medium shots, we've got over-the-shoulder shots, we've got a tilted frame. They're all shots that you will have seen watching a soap opera, watching a film at the cinema. And along the bottom you can see our sea captain. We've got a long shot where we can see him standing on the beach holding his hat. Then we go in for a medium shot where we can't see his legs anymore, but you can still make out that he's on a beach. You can see his kind of pirate style hat. And then the close-up where we can see more of his facial expression, but we can't really see the beach or anything else about the context of where he's standing. And that's what camera angles do. Film directors use the camera angles to really make us focus on a particular person's facial expression if it's really close up, or if it's a really sort of huge, very long shot, to look at a whole setting and the general atmosphere. Let's try and make this a bit easier again. What you're going to see now on this screen are pictures of Margaret Mahy, who wrote this extract that we're using for this question. So here she is now. The photographer who's taken this photograph has chosen kind of medium shot. We can't see all of her, but we can see her facial expression quite clearly. We get a sense of her age and the way she's dressed, perhaps suggesting certain things about her. The photographer's chosen for her to look happy in this photo and has asked her not to look directly at the camera. All of these things creating a sense of who she might be and how we might feel about her. In this second picture, she looks quite different. She's wearing a wig, she's holding a book up, she's got lots of badges on her clothing. Again, she's not looking at the camera. Again, it's a medium shot, but we get the sense that she's reading a story, pulling an expressive face, perhaps really concentrating on engaging other people in her stories. Now we see her in, it's actually the place where she lived, but we get the idea that she's perhaps someone who loves nature, being by the sea, somewhere beautiful. Again, another medium shot, but she's looking directly at the camera this time, so we feel like she's looking at us. We've got more of a relationship with her. That would be good in an article about her, for example. Now the next picture, she's reading to children. It's a longer shot so we can see her audience, we can see the children who are engaging with her. She's looking a little bit off camera and laughing, which gives a sense that she's fun-loving and friendly. So hopefully you can see as each picture starts to be revealed, we've got one author here, but each picture is giving us a slightly different feeling about the kind of woman that she is. And we know she's the same person, but the camera angles and the choice of frame and how much of her we see and where she's looking and things like what she's wearing are all changing the mood and our feeling about what kind of person she might be. Think about question 3 and we're talking about structure. What we're being asked to do is to look at the writer's organisation of ideas, including what they're asking us to zoom in on, what they're focusing our attention on, and then talk about how that's interesting us in the story that they're telling. So if we can't use words like simile and metaphor and alliteration, then what words can we use? Because the examiners do want us to try and use what they call subject terminology, as you can see that examiner with the arrow going to that in the mark scheme, a simplified version of the mark scheme there. You need to be able to make reference, use some subject terminology. So in the table above are some very simple words that will not be difficult for you to learn that you can apply to talking about structure. In the beginning counts as subject terminology. Words like shifts, changes tense, changes setting, zooming in, zooming out, widens, returns, introduces, echoes or repeats, pauses, flashes back, flashes forward at the end, and then you'll see the challenge stamp there by the word foreboding, something that's suggesting something's about to happen in the future, usually something bad. So there's some really straightforward vocabulary there that you could learn and practice using when you're talking about structure. So let's go back to the question. We've got 10 minutes thinking about the whole of the source and we're answering this question. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? You could write about what the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning of the source, how and why the writer changes this focus as the source develops, and other structural features that interest you. So for our 8 marks, these pictures along the bottom are going to be how we get them all. We're going to talk about the start of the extract, the shift, where there's a shift in tone, mood, environment, atmosphere, the finish line, what's happened at the end. And for each of those parts of the story, we're going to put them under the magnifying glass. Then we're going to think about how that director's used like camera angles and things to get us to focus and zoom in on particular ideas. And then we're going to relate it to how our reader might react to those. So here's an example to show you how this might sound. Along the bottom of the screen, we've got those questions. What's the writer showing us? How's the writer showing us this? Why is the writer showing us this? They're in 3 different colours because as I reveal to you the model answer, you'll see I've colour coded it to try and help you see how this would work. At the beginning of the extract, the writer introduces the pirate mother as impatient to reach the sea. The words in red are where we're using subject terminology. Beginning, introduces. The writer zooms in on the mother and describes how she is shouting for her son to hurry up as she is waving her cutlass from the wheelbarrow. The reader can sense her excitement, and this foreshadows the events that surround their eventual arrival. Meanwhile, the son seems less enthusiastic to reach the sea, and it sounds hard for him to trundle his mother along in the wheelbarrow. The fact that his brown suit has lost all its buttons shows that the journey has been challenging for him. This might make the reader feel sympathy for this character and prompts us to flash back to the long journey he's endured. So you can see the quotations that are being put under that magnifying glass. You can see the words in red that are using the subject terminology to talk about structure. You can see the purple, which is where the reader's reaction, why the writer's trying to show us this particular idea, how it's making us feel, is being explained. As the extract develops, the writer uses sensory imagery to shift the focus when describing that something new came into the wind's sense, recognised triumphantly by the mother as the smell of sea salt. The atmosphere then totally changes when Sam and his mother suddenly come over the hill where they suddenly see the sea beneath them. The writer uses this as the prompt to focus closely on the emotional impact of the sea on Sam, who is initially rendered speechless by the beauty of it, but then is described dancing a hippy-hoppy happy hornpipe with clothes that blow about in the wind, delighted to be free at last. This echoes the previous reference to Sam's movements as trundling and his suit as buttonless. The reader is encouraged to link the sea to his newfound sense of happiness, both in terms of his more energetic movements and also his more relaxed appearance. And then finally, at the end of the extract, the writer introduces a new character, the rosy sea captain, and then uses dialogue to humorously suggest to the reader that Sam and his mother's future will be spent out at sea as the captain's boatswain and cabin boy. The fact that the previously quiet and sensible Sam replies with an enthusiastic "Aye, aye, sir," as if he'd been saying this all his life, shows the reader that his encounter with the sea has transformed him, and consequently his future will be a more happy and adventurous one. So you can see all 3 colours being scattered across those 3 paragraphs, as well as the addition of those red words to show the structure terminology. If you have a go at doing this and using this technique, then you can mark your own work by colour coding it in the same way. If you're missing colours in a paragraph, that's your obvious target as to what you need to go back and try and do. And that brings us to the end of question 3. So hopefully that's given you some ideas about how to revise the priorities for that question and how you can take that simple strategy and apply it to your answer regardless of what text you end up having in front of you. I hope that's helped. Thanks for listening.